You ever hear a story so cold it feels like the temperature in the room suddenly drops? That's the feeling prisoners described when they talked about one of the Gulag's most terrifying punishments, a method so simple, so quiet, and so cruel. It didn't need whips or chains. All it needed was the human body, the Siberian climate, and time. They called it the freeze cell, though prisoners had harsher names for it: the White Death, the Silent Execution, the place where breath turned into ice before it even left your mouth. But here's what makes this story worse. It wasn't the only method the Gulag perfected, not even close. Imagine you're locked in a room made of concrete, so cold it feels like touching metal straight from a freezer. There's a drain in the middle of the floor. You don't know why it's there. Then the guards hose down the floor with water, just enough to cover the surface. They leave. You stand there, trying not to move, but you're already trembling. Minutes pass. The water begins to freeze. Your feet start to stick. You shift, but the ice forms faster than you can think. The cold moves upward, ankles, legs, ribs, until your whole body feels like it's turning into part of the floor. Survivors later said the silence was the worst part. You didn't scream, because the cold stole your voice before the fear ever could. You'd think that would be the limit of cruelty. But the Gulag system had a long list of ways to break the body without leaving scars. One of the most terrifying was something called the standing torture. Sounds almost harmless, right? But imagine being forced to stand perfectly still in a narrow cell, barely wider than your shoulders. No room to sit, no room to lean, no room to breathe deeply without hitting a wall. Hour after hour, muscles burning, knees shaking, sleep turning into something you can see but never touch. Some prisoners collapsed and broke bones because their legs simply stopped holding them. The guards didn't even need to check on you. They could hear the collapse through the walls. Here's the twist. None of these methods were invented in secret underground labs or experimental torture facilities. They were built out of boredom, out of convenience, out of the cold logic of a system that wanted total obedience. The Gulag was psychological warfare disguised as punishment. You weren't meant to just suffer physically. You were meant to question your own senses, your warmth, your strength, your memories, your sanity. That's why they used the black box, a punishment cell so dark you couldn't see your own hands even if you pressed them against your face. Prisoners said after a few hours, the darkness felt like a living thing, crawling inside your mind, whispering doubts you could almost hear. And when guards finally opened the door, the light didn't feel like freedom. It felt like another attack. If that wasn't enough, there was also the conveyor, the non-stop interrogation cycle that kept prisoners awake for days. No ropes, no chains, no visible wounds, just questions. Then more questions. Then the same questions again. Interrogators switched out like workers on a factory line. You didn't. You stayed there, standing or slumping, sleep slipping away until you weren't sure whether you were confessing or dreaming. The frightening part: many prisoners eventually signed anything put in front of them, not because they were guilty, but because sleep deprivation slowly rewired their sense of reality. The Gulag didn't need to beat you. It needed to erase you from the inside out. And then there was the pit, the well, a hole dug into the frozen earth where prisoners were lowered like objects. Some were kept for hours, others for days. Imagine being buried chest-deep in darkness, cold pressing against your ribs, the weight of the earth around you reminding you of a grave. Some sang to stay awake. Some whispered to themselves. Some said the silence felt like pressure, as if the earth was breathing with them. The purpose wasn't to kill. It was to make you wish you didn't exist. But here's the part most people misunderstand. These punishments weren't done because guards were monsters. They were done because the system rewarded obedience, efficiency, and fear. If a guard could break a prisoner without lifting a hand, that was considered good work. The cruelty wasn't personal. That's what makes it even more terrifying. Personal cruelty has limits. Systems don't. Why did the Gulag need such methods? Because the prisoners weren't just criminals. Many were scholars, poets, soldiers, and farmers, ordinary people caught in a political storm they couldn't escape. Breaking their will was more important than breaking their bones. A prisoner who obeyed out of fear was useful. A prisoner who obeyed because he believed resistance was pointless, that was the goal. When you look at these punishments together, the freeze cell, the standing torture, the pit, the darkness, the conveyor, they form a pattern. It's the pattern of a regime that understood something chilling about human nature. Suffering in silence destroys hope faster than suffering in noise. The Gulag made sure that no one outside could hear the screams, and eventually, no one inside could remember how to scream. And here's where the twist becomes a lesson. The Gulag didn't just punish people. It studied them. What made them break? What made them lose identity? What made them give up? And when you realize that, you start to understand the true horror. It wasn't the cold. It wasn't the pain. It was the methodical stripping of humanity, piece by piece, until a person forgot they were ever anything else. So what do we take from this? That silence can be a weapon, that systems can commit cruelty without ever shouting, and that remembering stories like these isn't about dwelling on misery. It's about recognizing how fragile dignity becomes when fear is used as a tool. The Gulag didn't end because people stopped suffering. It ended because people finally started speaking. If this story made you think twice about what humans are capable of on both sides of power, then don't let it disappear the way so many voices did inside those camps. Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me which part struck you the hardest, and let's keep this knowledge alive. And thank you, truly, for being part of this community. Your time here matters, and your curiosity keeps history from fading into silence.